what our wives generally need, what women generally need is this idea of safety, right? They need financial safety, they need physical safety, and they need emotional safety. And as men, it's our job to be able to provide all of those for us. Now, men often say like they appreciate hearing the reminder that our value as Jewish men, as husbands and as fathers, doesn't come from our paycheck. I speak with a lot of men, and when I start, gently drilling down to, what are men's biggest challenges and struggles, it usually comes down to, tirasa parnasa, right? The struggles to earn enough money and financial and things.
Shalom Aleichem, and welcome to Stark Tank. Stark Tank is a podcast about the challenges and opportunities of being a Ben Torah in the workforce. This week, we start the period of Shovavim, which is traditionally, in some circles, meant to focus on kedusha, what it means to be a man, relationship between a man and a woman. And I don't really come from those exact circles, but it's never a bad time to refocus and relearn and re-understand what our role is as husbands, as fathers, and as men in a very challenging world. And I'm so excited to have Aaron Zakowski, who is a marriage coach and has done a lot of research and thought about this issue a lot, to be joining us today. So Aaron, welcome to Stark Tank, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Yaakov. I'm excited to be here. This is fun.
And before we jump in, a quick personal request to all our listeners: please hit the subscribe button and leave a 5-star review. It really helps us grow this show and reach new listeners. So Aaron, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this field of marriage coaching.
Okay, absolutely. So big picture, I live here in Los Angeles. I lived in Israel for a long time before that. Grew up here in Southern California, though. I've been married 22 years. I've got, thank God, 6 kids. Spent a lot of time marketing in that world, but recently kind of got into this world of coaching men in shalom bayit and helping them be better fathers, better husbands. And really that came from just opportunities that I've had over the years to honestly invest in my own marriage and my own family really strongly, helping and mentoring other friends and people in my communities as well with that kind of work. One of the things I realized early on in my marriage was that most of us aren't taught what it means to be good husbands and understand women, who understand, how to make a successful marriage. We have our chassan classes, which teach us certain halachas and maybe a little bit more, but they don't really teach us how to understand women and intimacy and marriage and all these things that are so important. And there's classes here and there, but most of us are kind of just like pushed in and don't get enough. And so I've invested quite a lot of time in my own marriage. And like I said, in reading books and podcasts and coaches and rabbis that I've learned with how to do this. And I try and share that with other men now as well.
And I love the point about the distinction between chassan classes and what comes later. And we're going to get into that a lot more in this conversation. But just in your own journey, is there a particular incident, whether it's saying someone came to you or saying in your own life, you don't have to even go into any graphic details, but any specific story that made you think, wow, there's really something here that I can provide value and I should really be looking into this more?
So I'd say probably the turning point for me came pretty early on in my marriage. When I first got married, I was living in Queens in New York, and I was working in Manhattan. I was an accountant back in those days and working very long hours. And I remember coming back, it was, first year of marriage, maybe second year of marriage, and just coming back and finding my wife just, lonely, sad, I wasn't there enough with her. And recognizing in those moments that I was not providing for emotionally the way that I needed to. I was trying to be a man. I was trying to go and provide financially for us. At the time we didn't have kids yet, and I realized that there was more that I wasn't doing that I needed to be doing. And it was at that time that I decided to dedicate myself to really being as present emotionally, mentally as possible for her, and kind of set me down this path of learning as much as I can. As again, there's lots of resources out there, and I tried to immerse myself in those things. Thank God my parents modeled a very healthy marriage for me. But even in that, there's so many nuances that even in a healthy household, we don't notice the nuances of how our parents are relating and the efforts they're putting in with each other, because those aren't explicitly told to us as kids growing up in that house. So I did have a disposition that balanced me a little bit and grounded me well. And, I basically from there decided that this was what I wanted to do. And then people started coming to me, recognizing, I guess in me, someone, especially maybe looking at my kids also, who think God are, providing a lot of nachas and turning out pretty okay. And people come to me unsolicited and say, looks like you're doing a good job. Can you give me some advice? And so I've been able to have some very candid heart-to-heart conversations with a lot of friends over the years who've come to me. And in most cases, I think it's been very helpful. And so now I try to do it a little bit more practically for people.
Amazing. So let's start with that scene that you depicted from your own life. And it's a very classic scene. Work is not easy. It's hard. It takes long hours and it's necessary for parnasa, as you indicated. And you come home and it's late and your wife doesn't feel like you're there for her. But the big question that everyone, asks is like, well, what choice is there? Like work is the work. And unless you found some magic lottery ticket or somehow manage a super, amazing job that gets you home very early. So that's just like the reality. So let's start from there, from that picture. And in your situation or a parallel situation for someone else, what can they do?
Yeah, it's a great question. Everything is nuanced. Everything is about balance, right? So when it comes to supporting our wives, what our wives generally need, what women generally need is this idea of safety, right? They need financial safety, they need physical safety, and they need emotional safety. And as men, it's our job to be able to provide all of those for us. Now, men, I think, don't resonate with the idea of safety quite as much because I think just our gender in the world, we feel a little bit more secure, and women need to be taken care of a little bit more. I'm speaking general terms here. That being the case, yes, we need to go and provide for our families. To not do that would be irresponsible, and it's really not what your wife wants from you, right? She does want you to go and to be able to provide. But there's that element of, emotional safety as well, which is critically important and I think a lot of men don't fully understand. And recognizing that there's a big distinction between men and women as just, there's the famous book, Men Are from Mars, Women Are from Venus, which kind of explains this as ultimately like different species. And in some ways we are in the ways that we operate. Women are emotional first and logical second. Men are the opposite. We're logical first and emotional second. So we think about things as I'm solving a problem. I'm making parnasa to provide for our family. Everything's good. My wife has a problem. Let me give her a solution and fix the problem. Everything should be good. Fortunately, that's not really how it works, right? Our wives are generally emotional and they need to be supported as such. And we need to learn that that's not wrong, that it's okay. It's how they're made up. It's the reason we love them. It's the reason we're attracted to them because of their DNA is this very different. It should be a more feminine, softer, more relaxed being that they are. And we need to support that. So often what that means is recognizing when we come home to give them the attention that they want, to throughout the day find ways to show that we're still thinking about them. In the same way that I would say, like in the workplace, like, we always remind ourselves, we got to be thinking about Hashem in the workplace, right? We've got to recognize, we're doing these things, L'Shem Shemaim. Same thing during the course of the day, check in with your wife, send her a text saying hello, call her at lunchtime and say, hey, how are you doing? In the morning, just, give her whatever emotional support she needs so that she knows that she's still the center of your universe and that she's important to us. And when you come home after that long day of work, make sure that you're there to support her. And what that usually means is listening and validating whatever emotions she's going through at that time. Don't try to explain her why something's not really a problem, why she shouldn't have those feelings or emotions. Don't necessarily try to solve or fix her emotions. Let her have them. Those are the experiences that she's having right now, and it's how women process the world around them and the things that are going on in their lives. And as such, we need to, I think the best word really is validate where our wives are at. And in doing so, they're going to feel a lot more supported from us.
So you're saying that the long hours are not necessarily the core of the problem, but they could definitely be a contributing factor. There definitely could be situations where a person's work is directly impacting in a negative way his shalom bayis and his marriage. Are there any sort of diagnostics that you could help a listener who's listening to this to try to understand in what sense, maybe their job is a big part of the problem, or maybe the job can stay, but something more about their handling of the job and handling of themselves around the job that, that could change in order to significantly improve their marriage?
So I can't give a diagnostic for it, but what I would say is that someone needs to do the cheshbon nefesh to understand, like, am I in the right career, right, first of all? And am I applying the right amount of energy or stadlus towards that career, right? And what I mean by that is, again, especially those of us who live in America, but it's true in Israel and other places also, the financial pressures on us are enormous, to be able to provide for our families, to keep up with the Cohens in our communities and all the things that are going on. And that provides a lot of stress for a lot of men, and we have to provide a lot. But I think the most important thing for us to recognize is to keep things in balance and recognize where our real priorities are. Most of us, our real priority is not to make more money, but yet we still feel that pressure. It's to support healthy families. It's to daven, learn, all the things we need to do as a Jewish man. And in that situation, I think we have to remind ourselves, and a lot of people, as I put this out in content and things where I speak, men often say like they appreciate hearing the reminder that our value as Jewish men, as husbands and as fathers, doesn't come from our paycheck, right? It's so much more than that. Yes, we have to we have to earn money to support our families, but that's not our purpose. That's a means to our ends, right? So our value comes by helping our kids to grow up healthy, to connect them to Torah, to learn with them, to spend time with them, to help them be emotionally present. Same thing with our wives, to help them feel loved and cherished and chosen, and all those things. And I say that to people on both sides of the financial spectrum, right? There are guys out there. I live in Los Angeles. I'm looking out the window over Beverly Hills right now. There are people making enormous amounts of money, and yet they're disconnected from their family, and they feel like their value comes from their paycheck in many cases. Like their kavod comes from the fact that they're making a lot of money, and yet that's not really what it means to be a man, right? If you're not supporting your family properly. And then on the other side of that, there are guys who, unfortunately, are struggling financially, right? But they often feel like failures in many cases because they're not providing what they believe they need to be providing for their family. And that's also absolutely not true. If they are coming home after a day of work and they are showing love and support and kindness and emotional presence with their family, and their kids are growing up healthy, then that's success. And that's a successful man right there. And it's not connected to the amount of parnassa that we're bringing in. Again, not to dismiss the value of that, but it's just one piece, and money has to be recognized as the means towards the end.
Okay, so that's very interesting. I want to share how I've sort of thought about this, struggled with this same issue. It's very similar, but maybe from a little bit of a different angle, which is that if you'd have asked me as a young, very naive chassan about the balance between work and family, I would say, family first. Not worth it to start making sacrifices at home for the sake of your work. So I've gotten a little bit older, started thinking about things a little bit differently. And now I think about it more as like a tug of war. Because obviously, if I had to choose between my family and my work and had to only choose one and completely quit the other, it would certainly be my family. But that's not the reality. And my family provides me a lot of meaning, but I also have meaning from work. And I need to be able to find a way to balance those two while keeping the family more important, but also making sure that I'm able to invest properly in work. So how do you think about that dynamic when it comes to the scene, that you referred to, coming back late, the wife is not so happy you're coming back so late, and maybe if I could specifically, even without the money issue, which you referred to before, but the meaning in your life and how that spreads itself out between your life at home and your life at the office.
Sure. I think is an important question, and one that probably almost every guy struggles with at some point. From my point of view, our families come first, right? It mean we don't have to give everything of ourselves to our family, meaning we are individuals first, but in that we have chosen to take care of our families, our wives and our kids, and they do come first, right? So, but I think if we recognize the distinction of job and money as kind of two separate things, meaning we need the money in order to support our family. And that's really the only reason we should need it, right? Giving tzedakah, helping our community, all those things. But essentially, it's to support the people we love. I'll include the community in that. Our kavod and our purpose, though, should not come from that money, right? Our sense of importance should not come from that money. Now, the job that we do to earn that money, I believe, should provide us a sense of fulfillment, right? It should be enjoyable. It should be stimulating. We should be helping people, and it should make us feel good about the work we do. There can be some kavod that comes from that. There could be a good sense of contribution and all kinds of other good midot that can come from that, and that's important also. But that needs to come second to taking care of our family, because providing that financial element, we spoke before about safety, right? We spoke earlier before, women need emotional, physical, and financial safety. If a woman doesn't feel like she knows how she's going to pay the bills, if she's stressed out, she can't afford the things that her friends and her neighbors can afford, then that's going to create a certain level of stress and anxiety within her. It creates stress and anxiety within us as men also, right? But then that creates friction in a relationship. So we need to earn money in order to take care of our family. We need to have a sense of fulfillment from our work in order to feel fulfilled in our own personal lives. So I think that's the way that I would look at that balance, and also recognizing that there are different periods of our life that we might need to balance things differently. At the beginning of our career, which usually coincides with the beginning of our family life, we might need to be putting in more hours in order to set a strong trajectory for our career, such that we can be making hopefully more money later, and hopefully being able to diminish the amount of hours that we need to put into it to be successful, as become experts in our fields. So I think that's also recognizing that there's a time and a place for everything.
So on that last point about the different stages in life, that's something very interesting. And it goes back to what you were saying before, right? We get our chassan classes at a very specific slice of our life, and
Yeah.
life progresses and changes in very drastic ways as you start to have a family and have children and progress in your careers. So maybe you could talk about what you think are the biggest things that we miss as far as our conceptions of marriage and how they shift over time, broadly speaking, from the 20s to the 30s to the 30s and 40s and 50s. What are the big big shifts that we have to sort of be aware of in the role our marriage plays in our life, how we relate to our marriage during the ever evolving life around us?
Yeah. I think it's a great question. I think at the beginning of marriage, we'll say call that before kids, as the first phase. It's really important to set that foundation of learning communication, understanding your wife, understanding intimacy in your marriage in different ways, meaning not just in the bedroom, but also outside of the bedroom in terms of how we connect. We spoke before about how we understand our wives' emotions and feelings and how those have to be validated. And if we can learn those skills really early on, then we're really in a good place because learning them, life's only going to get more complicated when we enter the next phases of life. So start introducing babies, one baby, two babies, three babies, more, B'ezrat Hashem, like life gets more complicated, right? So now your wife, even if she's not working, and very often our wives are working, she's still overwhelmed by the pressure and the mental load that it takes to support a family from all the meals and the cleaning and the cooking and the kids and everything else that goes into that. And if we've set the foundation early of good communication and emotional support and all those things, we're going to be a much better place as the additional layers come on. Because what often happens is that as men with a family with kids, we come home from work, we've been stressed and overwhelmed. We've been working hard, slaving away to provide for our family. And we come home, and usually what men want the most is respect and appreciation, right? From our wives first, and from our kids also. But what often happens is we come home, and we want to be recognized and shown some love and respect and all that we come in. And more often than what happens is we're kind of snapped at. One might interpret it as nagging, complaining, being thrown a kid, whatever is going on. And in that chaos, a man can feel disrespected, right? And it's not out of an ill intention from his wife, but she's also overwhelmed. So I think understanding how to support our wives in those stages. And again, I'm not letting wives off the hook. Women need to learn how to support men also, but in this case, we're talking to men here, right? We need to know how to show up and transition better from work mode to home mode. And usually the way that I describe that, in a couple step transition, ritual almost, is I recommend men first and foremost, usually on your way home from work, have a little snack. Have an apple in the car, an energy bar, whatever it is, just so when you enter the home, you're not hungry. You don't have that low blood sugar. You're a little bit impatient. Have a little prayer, meditation, affirmation, whatever it is, right before you come into the door from work to just remind yourself of how you want to show up, how much gratitude you have to Hashem for the brachas you have of your wife and your kids in your home and all those things that you have. So that when you enter the home, you come in with energy and enthusiasm and love and patience, right? Greet your wife first because she's absolutely the most important one there. And then each one of your kids and give them just like a moment of attention to say, hi, how are you? How was your day? Looking them in the eye, caring, loving, and then just take a minute to go unwind yourself, put your phone away in your room, leave that there for a while so it's out of bounds for the next couple hours while you're going to be home with the family. If you need to change your clothes, if you need to use the restroom, don't disappear in there for a long time like men often do, but then come out focused and ready to help. And when I say help, I don't want that to be interpreted as you are the helper, your wife is in charge. I mean, help is in work. It's your family. Take responsibility, see what needs to be done, take initiative, to reduce your wife's stress when you come home, to be with your kids, to be emotionally and mentally present with them. If you can, give your wife a break at that point. Believe me, that's going to create closeness between you and your wife. If you can come home and be able to carry some of that weight and have that extra energy that you could find that inner strength to give her a break, right? And if you're not used to that, try and do it for 20 minutes, for 30 minutes, an hour. Realistically, it should be, until your kids go to bed and then you can finally relax a little bit. So find that transition period and it gets hard with young kids before it gets easier with older kids. For me, thank God, I've got teenagers, I've got kids that are out of the house already, and I've also got a 6-year-old and 8-year-old in the house, who were babies so long ago. And you're balancing different stages of life and different needs amongst the kids. And I think it's really important just to also make sure that we were talking about wives, but also with the kids, making sure that every kid gets at least a couple minutes of your undivided attention every day so that they feel seen. Kids don't need a lot of one-on-one attention, but they need some one-on-one attention. So I think the quality is more important than the quantity. If you're coming home relatively late, at least that each kid gets a little bit of focus time once a week. The same way you're gonna plan a date night with your wife. Try and create something with your kids also, even if it's just reading at bedtime, or if you got an older kid, go outside and shoot hoops with him for 20 minutes one night a week. Give the kids that time also.
Mhm. I have gotten some feedback from listeners who are a little bit older than me, and they said that I obviously ask questions that relate to the struggles of being on the younger side, family-wise and career-wise. So maybe could you take that a few steps further as far as people are progressing in their marriages as they get a little older, as their kids start getting out of the house? What are the important emphases to put on marriage and the home life in those stages? Even though obviously the practical challenge of kids up all night and all that stuff is beyond, but they're also the calls banveit, as we were talking about before. So what are the important things that you see at that stage?
Yeah, so I think it's important to recognize that there will come a time, Bezrat Hashem, in all of our lives where we will become empty nesters, or we will just have teenagers who really don't need that much of our time as much anymore as they did when they were younger. And when that happens, we need to make sure that as husbands and as wives, that our relationship is solid, that we didn't put everything into the kids and neglect our relationship. So again, all that whole everything we've spoken about up until this point about maintaining a basis of connection and communication and intimacy within the marriage is always important. But if you start to see how well you did it once it ends up being just the two of you, or you had end up having more alone time, the two of you, because the kids aren't. I wouldn't even say that they're not in the house anymore. It could be they're teenagers and they just don't need you as much anymore on a time basis there.
And just going back a moment to what you were referring to before, you sort of described, work can be very stressful. Being at home with little kids can be very stressful. Society has so much good in it, the way the world that, the wealthy and comfortable world that we live in. And yet stress seems to be this very prevalent challenge. Broadly speaking, the world of stress and how we handle that and how we handle a world that seems to be full of stressors, because obviously, stress is certainly not good on its own right, but also certainly in a marriage can have a negative impact.
Yeah, I mean, I speak with a lot of men, and when I start, gently drilling down to, what are men's biggest challenges and struggles, it usually comes down to, tirlasa pranasa, right? The struggles to earn enough money and financial and things. At least that's, within my world here in Los Angeles. And I believe it to be true in other places as well. Dealing with that stress is important. I think one thing that's just critically important is as men, we think about our own self-care. That I think, are often taught this kind of macho, independent, I can carry anything, I can handle anything type of perspective. And yet in reality, so many of us, we carry our own traumas and challenges that we don't even realize that we have. And the stress and anxiety can really be crippling. It can be crippling in our productivity. It can be crippling in our connection within relationships. I speak with lots of women also who tell me about how disconnected their husbands are emotionally. And that comes from a place of maybe putting up a defense that we want to feel vulnerable. But I think men need to become more comfortable being vulnerable. And part of what that means is not being afraid or having a stigma around going for help, whether that's a therapist, whether that's a coach, a mashpia. I think it's really, really important that men have someone to talk to because we carry a lot of weight. It could be a close friend, it could be a group, but I think it's something that we really, really need to normalize in our community where men are carrying so much pressure, not just for Parnasa, not just for large families that Bezrat Hashem we're going to have, but we're expected to be learning, we're expected to be at minyan 3 times a day, we're so many things, right? So I think taking care of the stress means having people to talk to, professionals and non-professionals, getting comfortable being open about the challenges that we have and not feeling that there's anything lacking in us when we're struggling with something. I think that's so important. And then finding time for the things that are important to us and our mental health. So that might be exercise, that might be meditation, it might be hobbies that we want to keep, whatever that might be. But having time for ourselves, because as much as we've spoken about today, emphasizing taking care of our families, it's also really, really important that we take care of ourselves because you can't continue to pour from an empty cup. We've got to keep ourselves fulfilled. And there's a lot. I mean, it really is a lot that men are carrying right now, and men need support. And I've said it, but I'll end on that again. I want to normalize that as a new trend within our community.
I want to tie that point back to something you mentioned a few moments ago. You spoke about kids, how they don't necessarily need a lot of your time in order to fill up their need for attention and love from their father. So is that applicable here as well? Are there ways to fill up yourself, to do self-care in ways that don't take up a lot of time? Because, personally, I don't think I'm the best at self-care, however you want to define it. But also, if you tell me to start doing self-care, I'm going to say, well, I already don't have enough hours in the day that I want to do, and you're asking me to do more. So there are other ways that can be sort of, high return, low investment of time, of quantity of time in the realm of self-care.
Yeah, I think most of us don't have enough time, right? At the same time, we can give ourselves more energy, more chayas by taking care of ourselves. By again, sometimes it's just stop and breathe deep a little bit. And sometimes it doesn't need to be time consuming. You need to find your own balance, right? And again, this is someplace where I must be a coach, somebody can help you to look within yourself, everybody in their own unique circumstances, to find what's their right balance. But I mean, let's take an exercise, right? We all know that exercise is important for us, not just for our physical health, but for our mental health as well. If I cut 15 minutes out of my sleep every night in order to do some light exercise, I will probably have more energy, not less. Maybe not in the first week, but ultimately I'm going to feel more invigorated, right? It doesn't have to mean I'm going and running 5 miles in the morning, or it doesn't even have to mean I'm going to the gym. That could just mean like I do some yoga stretching and calisthenics in my living room on a yoga mat because I woke up 10 or 15 minutes earlier. I did some push-ups, I did some sit-ups, some jumping, something. You're going to feel better. If it means, reading a book, a fiction book, just because it's enjoyable, maybe it means you have a television show that you watch a little bit. Everyone's going to find the thing that works for them a little bit. That's their them time, and also recognizing within our lives that there are places where we waste time. If someone's using social media and they're scrolling, like that time is being wasted. Maybe it could be used towards something more productive yourself as well. Again, I definitely believe we all need a little bit of downtime. Social media usually is not a good use of downtime because it doesn't really recharge your batteries. Reading a book, closing our eyes, exercising, meditating, going for a walk. There's so many other ways that we could fill our batteries a little bit more.
Got it. And we talked about stress. Another term that I think about a lot is self-esteem. I'm sure it touches on a lot of things that we talked about before, but within the realm of self-esteem, feeling like you're worth something, feeling like you have what to give, what other sort of points are important to keep in mind as far as a person's self-esteem that maybe we haven't touched on or haven't focused on so far in this conversation?
Yeah, self-esteem is a big one. It's a deep one. As a coach, and I'll be clear, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychiatrist, any of those types of things. It depends on how deep those problems run. Often we carry traumas from our childhood that we don't even realize. Whether we felt abandoned, whether we felt we weren't good enough. Some of the times we carry those things without even knowing it, and they show up in different ways. And I think it's a very long conversation when that might be a little bit above my pay grade to help people deal with that. But I do think on a basic level, being able to speak with friends who can see through our situations in ways that we can't is often very helpful. I'll speak for myself. There have been times when I have felt down, and I have spoken with friends who have reminded me very authentically, and I think very honestly, of all the great things I have going for myself, all the reasons why people like me. Again, I don't need that often, but we all need it sometimes, that little pick me up. And we have people around us, and often friends are better than wives or parents or kids when it comes to those things. I also think there's a place for affirmations, having certain documents we put together for ourselves of things we can read to remind ourselves of the mental states that we want to be in, of reminding ourselves of what our priorities are, to read them every morning or before we go to bed every night. And that can be put together, again, reminding ourselves how we want to show up as fathers and husbands, reminding ourselves of the value that we add to our community, of the fact that our value doesn't come from our money one way or another. All those things I think are very helpful, but that's a very broad topic of self-esteem.
Okay, we've covered so much ground and we're running a little bit short on time, but let's try to hit on a few more important topics before we wrap up. So, with regards to the man's understanding of women in general, his wife in particular, we touched on that a little bit more. Let's quickly review maybe some of the biggest misconceptions that you see when people come to you for coaching as far as what it means for a man to really understand his wife on a deep level and be able to provide her what she needs.
Biggest misunderstandings. Listen, I think the biggest challenge, and again, we spoke about this a little bit already, is just that understanding how to support our wives in their emotions. Because so often as men, our natural state is we want to provide, we want to fix, we want to find solutions. So when our wife tells us such and such happened today and I'm really upset about it, our first reaction is to say, "Oh, don't worry about that. It's not a big deal." Or, "Oh, let me go and find you a solution for that." And that feels very logical to us. And it's not a place for logic. And that breaks our brains as men a lot of the time. Usually, again, speaking in general terms, usually the better thing we could do is to listen, to validate, to explain to our wives, I understand why that makes you feel upset, frustrated, whatever the emotion is she's going through. I'm here for you, to give her a hug, to just let her feel validated that the emotion that she's feeling is okay, that she's seen, she's heard, she's loved anyways, she can have the emotion. And most of the time, don't try to fix it. Or at that point where you've been able to just sit with her for a few moments, ask her if she would like for you to find a solution or not. Sometimes she doesn't want one. Sometimes she just wants to figure that on her own, but she's just feeling caught up in that anxiety. And we experience anxiety often related to money and the other things that we spoke about before. And if you think about those feelings that we might feel on those anxious days, maybe draw a parallel to that's how she's feeling because of something that happened to her during her day. And if I was told, I'll say on one of my anxious days, oh, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. Just like, think positive thoughts. I would say like, gee, thanks. Like that's not going to work. That's not helpful at all. And that's pretty much, I think, how women feel the same when we tell them like, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal when it is a big deal to them. So I think that understanding of women's emotions is the biggest misconception that men have.
And, maybe someone is following that playbook the way you described it. Maybe they aren't, but a person, whether they're married for a short time or a long amount of time, could have been in a situation where he just sits himself and says, I don't know what she wants from me. I just don't get her. Is that a normal feeling? Is that a problem?
It is definitely a normal feeling. I would imagine most men hit that point at least once a day, even after they've been putting in the work and trying to understand all these things, because everything that we've been speaking about today is not intuitive to us. And it's something we have to accept, even though intellectually I could be told all these things about how a woman operates. Doesn't mean I really understand it. It just means I just accept it for what it is and I do it. But that in the moment, you've got to recognize it in the moment that these things are happening. And often that's very hard. So it's one thing to say academically in a conversation between two men, here's what you got to do. It's a very different thing, when you're at home and in the heat of that moment that someone's complaining about something and you just want to like respond. Well, I would say what we want to do is we want to respond patiently and in the way that we know we should respond rather than reacting impatiently or snapping or getting frustrated.
Okay, so for our final section, it could be, we have listeners of all types. That the next section is really for our listeners who are married men. And I do want to ask you just for some of the big pointers that you see that people need to hear with regards to their intimate wives with their lives. So if you could share some of the most important things that you've come to learn, you've spoken to, Rebbeim and Gedolim about these issues. So what are some of the big things that people need to remind themselves or continue to learn and be, receive Sizik in with regards to their most, most holy and private parts of their life?
Yeah. So our intimate lives, our bedroom lives with our wife, which are obviously extremely holy, and due to the sensitive nature of them, we don't talk about them publicly in the frum community, which is good and bad, right? We want to be sensitive to them, but at the same time, unfortunately, it means they don't get discussed, and people don't learn much. They don't understand much. They have a lot of incorrect assumptions about that part of our lives. Before we get married, typically women are taboo. We don't talk to them. We don't touch them. We don't talk about intimate topics at all. And then suddenly we get married, and maybe before that we've had our chassan classes, women have their kala classes, and we've learned mostly the halachas of taras mishpacha. Very important, right? Maybe we've gotten a little bit of anatomy of like, here's what we're going to do and here's how it works, and usually it's not much, right? But our intimate lives are so important, and we go in a kutze, like from like usher to like mutter and holy, right? Like, and in the course of like one day, and that creates a lot of trauma, I think, for people because people feel shame around sex, around intimacy. They feel embarrassment, and again, I'm speaking of men and women in this stage. And I understand where that comes from based on the way that we relate to these things, but it's very unfortunate and that needs to be dealt with. So I think within our relationships, we need to learn open communication around intimacy with our wives, and also being willing to speak with people that can help. One of the places where I've been trying to coach and mentor people is having these conversations. Usually I do it in private, one-on-one or very small groups of people because of the nature of the topics that we talk about. But understanding that well, I'll take a step back. Often our first encounters, whether it's on our wedding night or shortly after, they're not what we expected them to be. They're not as graceful as we expect. They're awkward, right? Often couples are not able to even fulfill the mitzvah on the first night. And that's normal, but people don't know that's normal. Often if something like that happens, they could have a shame. They could feel like they're broken, like they do something wrong. And from day one and like first try, their entire trajectory of their intimate life can be off course right now. And I think it's really important, as much as we don't want to talk about these things openly in our community, that we do anyways. And again, I've spoken with Rabbanim who have encouraged me to have these conversations in the appropriate forums like this on these topics, to let people know those things are normal, to let men know that certain sexual dysfunction, for lack of a better word, is extremely normal. I'm not going to get into all of them here out of sensitivity for things, but men have trouble with different elements physically, with certain elements and those things are treatable and those things are normal and they shouldn't be an embarrassment. And often when men carry those things for a long time, it affects their desire, their confidence in the bedroom, and those things are problematic also. So I think it's really important that these topics are spoken about more openly. People recognize more that the challenges that they might feel, the discomforts they might feel, are things that can be fixed and overcome.
So I appreciate you sharing that, and you share it with such sensitivity and such an important topic. And so I really appreciate that. Just a follow-up question. So someone's listening to this and I think, yeah, I actually do have X, Y, and Z issues. Yes, I have a lot of shame and I never thought about actually speaking about it with anybody. It's just all living inside me. What's the next step? What are the most important resources they should be aware of? And what are some resources, if you're aware of any, that maybe people think they can go to and they should actually be avoiding?
Well, I mean, definitely reach out to someone that you trust in the space. I mean, if someone wants to be in touch with me, email me or anything after the show, definitely I'm here to have a conversation and point you in the right direction. There are a number of organizations out there. There are lots of Rabbanim that you can go to. I think people should go to Rabbanim about these topics more. I think a good Rav, a mature Rav, shouldn't be afraid of these topics. If your Rav won't talk to you about these, then that's his
Find a different
own.
route.
Well, again, at least for these topics, right? A Rav might be very good on Hilchos Shabbos, but uncomfortable talking about these things. But then you should find another Rav for these topics. So there are many rabbis that will speak very openly about these topics. And again, I've had conversations with one of the Rebbeim that I go to, and he'll tell me of probably hundreds of couples that have come to him with intimacy related questions. He said, so many people have so many misconceptions. He said, many people have a desire for something in the bedroom, whatever that might be, to do things a little bit differently. And people assume it's usher. And really it's mutter, but they can go years and decades, not fulfilling themselves because they thought something wasn't allowed. Or the opposite is people make assumptions because they look on the internet about something that they thought was allowed and turns out, it wasn't allowed. Have these conversations with a Rav or talk to a therapist. Lots of intimacy coaches that are out there. I recognize that there are more female than men, which makes it a little bit difficult for men because you typically are not going to want to speak to a woman about these things. But there are people out there, or a doctor, depending on what the issue is, also could be helping with certain things.
Okay. So any final thoughts on this topic before we head to our lightning round?
I think the last thing I would just simply say is recognizing when it comes to desire for intimacy. I think it's often a sticking point that men want bedroom time more, women typically do less. And I think the important thing to recognize is that women also want it, but they need something a little bit differently. So typically the way that I think about it is that women want to feel emotionally connected before they want intimacy. But men are the opposite. We want intimacy often in order to feel more emotionally connected. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there. In order for us to align properly there, we need to help our wives to feel more emotionally safe, as we've been speaking about for a while, and help them feel wanted and desired and calm and reduce their stresses and all that. That will help to put them in the mood. But also, if you want to be intimate this evening, for example, don't start now. Start seducing, foreplay, for lack of a better word, throughout the course of the day. I would say that, seduction starts in the kitchen. Do the dishes, tell your wife to have take a break, like do things, or text you during the day, just showing your appreciation and love for her. And you'll start to open her heart and warm her up in ways that make her desire more also. And that's where connection really comes from.
I love that line, and I appreciate that a lot. Before we go to our lightning round, where can people find you? Where can people reach you? You're also putting out a lot of content on these odd topics, on the issues that we're talking about. So where can they go to get those resources as well?
Great. So I would say, I've been relatively active on Instagram. You could find me at Aaron Zakowski. I think one of the places where I'm putting the most content right now is I've started a Shalom Bayit daily WhatsApp group, primarily focused on marriage and fatherhood tips for men. Although women are welcome to join also. It's usually just me posting pretty much every day, just one tip, a short video or something. If you want to find that group, you can go to, I have a shortened link at dadcoach.co/WhatsApp. to join the WhatsApp group. And then there's also a free webinar that I put together on a lot of these topics that there's pre-recorded on demand that you could visit at dadcoach.co/webinar and then the number one to find that and sign up for that.
Okay, amazing. So let's go to our lightning round. 3 short questions, 3 hopefully
Yep.
short answers. We're here in the winter. We have nice long Friday nights. What do you like to do at that time?
That's a great question. Usually at my house, it's game time. This past Friday night we played games. We had a Connect Four tournament with my boys. It's a fun time.
Okay, amazing. And what's your favorite sefer on the Parsha to get some inspiration, some ideas, some new insights week after week?
Sefer on the Parsha. Usually I'll go to something from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, a Maimer or Sefer.
Okay, beautiful. And finally, if you were forced to leave marriage coaching, leave any of your past background in marketing, find a new job, join a new industry, maybe something you dreamed of doing as a kid, what would that be?
Probably something in real estate investing or home services, contracting, things like that.
Okay. Aaron Zakowski, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for all these very valuable ideas on a super, super important topic.
Thank you, Yaakov. It's been great.
All right. Thank you so much.